This next guest literally almost died. Went through some crazy times, reinvented himself using the podcasting game, and is now a best-selling author, podcaster, and personal friend. Next on Don't Turn It. Hello, Tom Levecki here with the latest edition of the Armchair NBA. If you haven't checked it out, check out my interview with Michael Mata, CEO of Virtual Cons. They do the Sopranos Con, Mob Movie Con, and they're about to hopefully buy the Sopranos house. Great entrepreneur, great guy. Check that out. It should be on the previous video on the channel. Today, we have a very, very, very special guest, a personal friend, Jeremy Ryan Slate, author of the newly launched Unremarkable to Extraordinary. Ignite your passion to go from passive observer to creator of your own life. Jeremy is going to share with us kind of the tools, the basic tools. You got to buy the book, and we're going to do a giveaway we're going to announce, so you got to stay to the end. We're going to talk about how to create your own life. Jeremy Ryan Slate, welcome to the Armchair NBA. How are you doing today, buddy? Welcome back.
Hey, man! I'm stoked to be here. I'm like seeing on the bottom here. You got merch and stuff now, man. You are like above me in terms of brand level, brother.
Yes, we do. We have the what are these called? The rough cases. I got this every day. It works perfectly. I got the hat. I got shirts on order. Check out the Armchair NBA store. It's a great way to cop the merch, support the podcast, and help us get great guests like Jeremy.
You guys need like frisbees and dog bones and like you need all sorts of like wild random Armchair NBA stuff.
Yeah, you ain't kidding. So I want to go through, and I interviewed Jeremy a while ago for New Theory. We don't want to do the whole formative years.
Yeah.
You had a really tough time in your life where you weren't well, respectfully. I want to go a little bit briefly about, hey, give us your down points, and then that inflection point where you said to yourself, you know what, I want more in life, and this is how I'm going to do it, Jeremy.
Yeah, which one of those points, man? There have been some points, man.
I don't mean to be. I hate to bring it up, but when they were the last rights here, I thought it was pretty impactful.
You know, it's wild, man, because it's like it didn't really change my life at all. It was just kind of like this weird experience of like, like feeling like you're like part of a room and everything, but you're not awake, you're not asleep. It's really freaking weird. But the thing that actually impacted me was a bunch of years later. So that was 19. When I was 24, my mom had a really bad stroke. And that actually really hit me, man. Like that was one of the single roughest events that have ever happened in my life. And which is weird because you think like, getting last rites and almost dying would be like that thing that changes you. And like for me, it was something happening to somebody else really, really close to me that kind of made me look at it. And I don't know if it's a selfishness thing. I don't know if it's 19 and feeling invincible or whatever it is, but really at that point, to me, yeah, I got last rites and everything like that, but like I didn't expect like, hey, I'm gonna die. But like almost losing a parent was like a really, really rough thing. And at that point in time, I was teaching high school here in New Jersey, in private school, by the way. So you make like $10 and you work like 1,000 hours a week, if there even are 1,000 hours a week. So I just was not very happy. And when that happened, it made me look at a lot of different things in my life. And I'm like, do I want to be doing this the rest of my life? So I actually, jumped from that and I tried everything, man. In-home personal training, network marketing, selling life insurance, going to China, buying products and reselling them on Amazon. Like I tried everything, man. And I literally just tried this podcast in 2015 and it took off and it really helped me to get launched as kind of a nobody to, really somebody now with a great show. As you mentioned, a book coming out and our company, Command Your Brand.
So we have a lot of people that watch the show, right? And what's interesting about the Armchair MBA kind of community, if you will, I call it that. You got like business guys like me, and I almost busted out twice where almost it was like financially devastated and it affected people's jobs, people's lives, affected my own life. I was able to kind of learn from it and move on. We have some people that are kind of like, we're in the street and maybe got tripped up with the law and you know what, they're good people and they kind of, didn't recidivate. Like, you know what, Tom, what do I do now? I have a felony, I have this, I have that. Your whole premise of your podcast, Create Your Own Life, and this book, also kind of touches it. You can craft and create your own life. Let's talk about the first step. I don't want to go over adversity. Okay, you know what? We all have adversity.
Yeah.
Now what? Give us a foundation to day one, day zero, day one. Hey, I want to turn around my life. What do I do, Jeremy?
Well, I think skipping adversity, man, is actually a huge mistake, right? Because you have to look at it that it's the viewpoint on it and what you do with it. That's a huge thing, right? Like you mentioned, somebody's got a felony, if they've got some of these different things, like some of those things seem unsurmountable, right? And a lot of people would see that and they'd either run the opposite direction.
Right.
They'd find a great place on the couch and their favorite beer, and that's how they would take life. Somebody to really be extraordinary, they look at that adversity, whether it's, losing a business, whether it's losing a loved one, whether it's something that happened to even you, and they say, okay, this is kind of a rough situation. I'm gonna think about this for a second, but now, like, what can I get out of this situation, or what can I learn from this situation? Because even with some of the mafia guys you've interviewed, there's a ton of opportunity in their story, and there's a ton of opportunity in the people they know in that positioning as well. So I think, like, how you look at adversity is extremely valuable, man, because you can look at it in such a way of like, okay, what can I do with this situation? What can I get out of this situation? How can I be different on the other side of it? So to me, to skip adversity would be a huge mistake, because a lot of people and how they look at it is actually going to be the major thing to kind of what they confront and go after in life. So I would actually say, how you look at adversity rather than even what you do with it, like how you look at it is vital.
Well, you're right. I guess I probably misspoke, but I'll give you a specific example. Right.
Yeah.
I was speaking to two different felons. Right. Felon number one is.
I feel like this is the only place you could have this conversation, by the way. So I was speaking with two different felons.
Exactly. And people reach out, and I do my best if I can. I offer some coaching. I try to do it on the arm if I can, and I try to help out where I can. But I'll call them person A, person B. Person A was like going on and on and on, and I've never been arrested. I never had any charges. I don't know like what felons can't do. Like you can't vote and you can't do certain things, and the list is pretty prohibitive. And I was actually shocked at a lot of the things you can't do. But the challenge for person A was they were just educating me on everything they can't do, right? And I'm like, okay, like I get it, and that's a big deal. But then what, right? Versus person B was talking about what they can do, right? I could be an entrepreneur. I can drop ship. I can do construction. I can, save up some money and get a friend. All these different things.
Right.
And not that the person A was a bad person. It's just that when I kind of first started talking to them, their mentality is what separated them, and person B is very much farther ahead in that case. Okay, so you kind of identify the adversity. You kind of say, okay, I need to change things around. What do you do next, Jeremy?
So I think a really big part of it too is courage, right? And I think the thing when you look at it that's interesting, I think we kind of have this idea of like what courage looks like. Everybody thinks like we just had the D-Day anniversary a few days ago. Everybody thinks like Saving Private Ryan, and like that's their idea of courage, which that is a courage kind of taken to the extreme, right? But for a lot of us, courage is a sliding scale.
Right.
What may take courage for you or what may take courage for me are two very, very different things, man. So like it's really important, in how you approach it to realize that courage is not like a definite and finite thing, but it's looking at something that scares you, looking at something that's difficult and figuring out, how can I go past this? How can I do more with this? That's what courage really looks like. So I think when you can look at that and realize, okay, this is the situation, this is what I'm going to do with it, this is where I'm going to go, then you can kind of do some things that are risky, man. You can kind of do some things that are like, all right, this might be a little bit hard, but I'm going to go for it. And here's the thing you have to think about is it's like building a muscle. The more times you do things that feel like take courage for you, the less courage it actually takes to do those things in the future, if that makes sense, because you kind of get flat on the idea of what courage is because you've attempted so many times.
So prospectively, not retro, prospectively, how do you overcome, for example, my wife has a super fear of public speaking. And that's hard, right?
I did early on, man. So if you want to confront that one, we can chat about that.
Let's use that as an example. So you have a super big fear. Let's call public speaking. How did you get over it? Because now you're a public figure. So that's actually a good example.
So just I apologize. Just 1 second. Somebody's trying to call me. And I'm trying to make sure they just call somebody else. Sorry about that, man. So when you look at it, it's for me, this is how it worked, right? Like, so when I first kind of started with like this being able to be in front of people, I was a high school teacher, and this was back in 2012.
Yeah.
I was nervous. Am I allowed to swear here? Because this is
Yeah.
close to YouTube. I can't swear.
Yeah.
I was like nervous as shit, man. And so what I did is I created this slideshow for my class with 180 slides. You can imagine how poorly that went. Like, it was terrible. So, kind of fast forward to when I started the podcast. The reason this was an audio only podcast early on is because I didn't want to have to look at people, because that scared the hell out of me. So, I got to 100 conversations. I got to 200 conversations. I got to 300 conversations. And the more of those conversations I got, the more comfortable with it I was, and then we started moving to doing video. And then, people were like, hey, you want to come speak to my small groups? So I spoke to some small groups. I went to some Rotary groups. I went to some, small local chamber of commerce stuff. And, a couple of years ago, then I started speaking to 500 people, 1,000 people. I couldn't have done that in 2012, man. So if ever you're going to approach anything, it goes back to the idea of courage, right? It's a sliding scale. And the more you do things you perceive to be hard and consistently do them and kind of work it on a gradient, man, that's how you get there. Like, you can't just say, all right, I am no longer afraid, 500 people, let's go. Because you may pee your pants on stage, man. It could happen.
So, on Jeremy's, how many podcasts are you in now? How many have you done?
We're going to hit 1,000 on July 4th. I love the timing, by the way.
That's crazy. Okay. You interviewed some big name. I mean, like, I'm pretty, like, I like I said, I always say there's two things I'm decent at life. One is, asking questions and interviewing. I'm not the best at it, but I'm decent at unpacking and learning people's experience. But number two, I'm pretty good at guest acquisition. It's always been a talent of mine. But your next level, give us some name drop a little bit. Give us some of the 2 or 3 or 4 big names that you had that you were surprised that you got. And what were some of the learnings that you got from interviewing them?
Thomas F. LaVecchia.
That's it.
Dude, I don't know how the hell I did it, man.
Mine did well though. Like, I know I've been on a few.
Yours did extremely well, so don't sell yourself short. But like, no, I've gotten to talk to some really incredible people, like a 4-time Indy 500 champion, which he came close this past month, man, to becoming a 5-time. Elio Castroneves.
Oh, wow.
We had Grant Cardone on the show. We've had former CIA director and 4-star general David Petraeus.
That's a biggie.
We've had Dave Rubin on the show twice. Dave actually was just back on the show last week. So I've had a chance.
I got blown off by him, but if you could help me out there.
Okay, I'll bring you back around, man, because now he's got a new book and it's really good. But like, I've been very lucky to talk to some great people, and kind of the further along I've gotten, I've taken on some riskier subjects, because for me, as I've grown, I've wanted to do a little bit more of that and really talk about things that matter. So we've had James O'Keefe from Project Veritas on. We've had Mike Lindell on. So like, I've had some really great conversations, and I've been very, very lucky.
So this is where podcasting is a vehicle. We're going to get there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Jeremy has and had a very successful podcast along the way, right? He's like my kind of mentor, if you will, in the traditional podcasting space.
Oh, shucks, man.
Yeah. And I was going to say it. Fuck it. We weren't living our truths. And here's what I mean. Jeremy, if I may, and I'll have you elaborate. Well, let me do mine first, and then I'll set you up. Me is, I like the mob stuff. I like just the business and the Cosa Nostra. I like the machinations, business moves, how they did it, how you can learn from it in your everyday life. And like, I was almost ashamed of it in a way. I couldn't, like, I'm an Italian American, and like a lot of people in my family and people in my community shun mob stuff to begin with. In order to learn, you have informants on sometimes, and then
hopefully they don't eat at Olive Garden.
Well, exactly. And then the people
I gave you so much shit for that, by the way, when you guys had the post about Olive Garden.
I posted it on my community here. People thought it was serious, but then it gets better. Then people are kind of within that life that was like, don't like me or don't like it because like, well, you have informants on, I can't rock with you. My point being is like, but this is what I would like to do, and I don't make a ton of money on the podcast, but I really enjoy doing it. The same thing with you. Not that you got uber political, but you weren't afraid to talk to a Mike Lindell, the pillow guy. You weren't afraid to talk to certain people and have certain riskier subjects on. And that actually helped your podcast. Versus, I thought by me narrowing to the mob stuff, but you narrowing a little bit, for lack of a better word, maybe politically, I thought that would jam us both up. But I think we both strived as a result. So how important is it to be to find your truth early and then live that truth?
Well, here's the thing is I don't think you have to find it early, right? Like, because, you know, even like we built an audience, we had a successful show. I
Yeah.
took a huge hit when we started talking about
Oh,
some of
you
the things I
did?
wanted. We lost like 40% of our audience, like from those episodes. But here's the thing that happened is we grew more than where we were when we started because of the subjects we were doing. And at the same time, I was able to like be myself and have some great conversations. And I think that shows up more in the conversation because you're actually being the person you are and not something you think people want to buy or be interested in or whatever it is. And you know, because of that, I've just had more fun with the brand, man. So I think that's what it really comes down to is you let people really know you. You have something you can really build community around. And I think that's what you're seeing with Armchair MBA, right? It's like, you know, the other stuff you've done was great, but it wasn't doing what Armchair MBA is doing because you're being true to who you are and people are really kind of coming to that. And I think when you look at it, that's what it's all about, man, is being uniquely you. And it kind of goes back to courage, man, kind of having the courage to say it. Cause it's like, what's the worst that can happen, right? Because before you're kind of topped out in growth, whereas, you know, like when you're being yourself, you kind of don't really have a cap, right? There's a lot you can do with that. There's a lot of different directions you can do. So I think it's kind of a roundabout way of saying it, but I think like when you could be more uniquely yourself, it's number one, more enjoyable. And number two, it's actually really going to help your reach.
All right. So let's build on this. Courage, whether you find the truth earlier or later, really obviously hard work has come into play. But now you got to kind of find your vehicle, right? You found it from podcasting. Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy has a very successful company, Command Your Brand. So if you're looking for PR through the podcasting space, it's a remarkable company that he has. He's doing really well. Again, the book, which we're going to do a giveaway, we'll talk about in a little bit. Unremarkable, extraordinary, ignite your passion. But your vehicle was, is podcasting. For
Yeah.
people that got to find their lane. Okay, hey, I'm courage, and I want to do this, and I know what I can do, and positivity, positive vibration, all this great stuff, right? But now it's time to find your lane and execute, right? And you found it through podcasting. Do you
Mm-hmm.
recommend people try to find like five different things and go with like what they love and what works? Or are you more like, no, you know what? If you know what you really want, go after it. Even if it doesn't work, keep going. I want to get a feel for how you found podcasting and what do you recommend for other people?
That is the like single most loaded question I think I've ever been asked, man, because you could go
I'm
like 5 different ways with that.
hell
I'm
yeah.
gonna have to agree with you to disagree with you to answer the question while disagreeing, if that makes sense. Because it's like it's
Perfect.
not one way and it's not the other, right? Like I think when you look at it, you know, you kind of mentioned like, you know, you get the motivation and stuff like that. Like knowing me, you know that I'm like, all right, man, that's kind of BS. Like just go
Yeah,
do something. So I
correct.
think that's kind of one part of it. There's a really great book that I read that's actually been kind of like a guiding principle to me. And it's I actually just got a message from a listener about it the other day. Like it's a book that I talk about again and again. It's called So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport.
Oh, wow.
And it's based on something he read, a Steve Martin, the actor there, the you
Oh,
know,
yes,
two
yes, yes,
wild and crazy guys.
yes.
You know, like he they asked him like, Steve, like, you know, you're transcendent as a comedian, like how did you get this? He goes, well, you know, man, I just was so good they couldn't ignore me. And Cal Newport talks about this idea of like finding something you're good at and just continue to get better and better and better at that until you become passionate, right? But I think so many times people are like, especially in my generation, they want to be passionate before they have the doingness and how it makes money, right? Because you could be passionate about crocheting, man, but you're probably not going to make any freaking money unless you can figure out how to sell it. So your passion has to meet what actually makes you money. And I think when you can figure that out, man, that's what it's about. And when you can get to a point where you are like the go-to, the best, and you're kind of living what you're good at, that's where it works. But your passion is important, but your passion's got to make money or, you know, you're just going to be passionately broke.
What about so armchair is a side hustle for me. It's a side hobby, if you will. But
It's
I
an
am
empire.
Yeah, right. But I am looking to kind of step it up. But I'm treating it now like I never did before. I'm treating it like I do all my other business, right? Before I was kind of like bleeding money or losing money or just not really focused on monetization. I'm trying to, we have the merch store now, and I have picked up some clients from it on my regular life, which is pretty cool. So I'm starting to see the monetization. But the monetization started because I focus on the monetization, right? My point being is, how important is focus, right? And how do you know if you're focusing on the right thing?
That's a really good question, by the way. That's an excellent question because here's the thing you have to take a look at, and at a certain point you just have to pick something and go with it. Do you get what I mean? Because like everything kind of looks good at a certain point, and you kind of got to get far enough down the road to know if it's going to work out. And
Correct.
I think that's why it's really hard to like at 18 years old pick a college major because you're
Yes.
like, number one, I'm going to be doing this the rest of my life. Number two, this career going to be around in 10 years.
Yeah.
So like I think to me, I'm a big proponent of something called apprenticeships. And,
Yes.
you know, that's where you work for somebody for little pay or no pay, and you kind of figure out how to do it. And you do that in a couple different fields until you find out kind of what's your jam. And, you know, it's not quite the same as an internship because, you know, it's something you're kind of choosing to do without your school involved. But I think if you can find somebody you want to work under, like you look at plumbers and electricians and everything, like they have that model built up really well, where you have to be an apprentice for a period of time, and you know you make some money. It's not as well as you're going to make as like a master plumber, but like you make some money for a period of time. You get the skills, you get the knowledge and the ability, and you also get the discernment. Right, the discernment is really really important because to invest in something as expensive as a college degree without discerning whether you want to do this and is that college degree necessarily going to help you make money anyway? Maybe not. So I think to me, it comes down to, you know, trying some things, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, but also like working with somebody that's done it and done it well so that you can kind of discern if this is what you want to do, man.
Well, so it makes sense, but then practicality gets in the way, right? You're younger than me. I'm not a spring chicken. You know, then I kind of say, okay, how much time? Let me pull that.
Yeah.
Let me pull that one. Let me give you another one. How much time do you give something to see if it's working or not?
That's tough. And that's why I recommend the best way to start anything is as a side hustle.
Yeah.
Because when you have to depend on something paying your bills, you make some really shit decisions based on what you need this week.
Yeah.
And to me, like when I started this podcast, I started as a side hustle. I worked at somebody else's marketing firm, started a podcast because I was passionate about it. You know, you talk to a lot of guys in real estate and, you know, if they want to stay at real estate investing, you got to have a job to be real estate investing because you got to have a good credit score and everything else and be credit worthy in order to do it. So to me, you make better decisions when you're building something alongside what you're doing. And then you get to a point where that other thing you're building either takes more of your time or makes, you know, close enough to the same money where you got to make a decision. That's to me the best way to do it is start something while you're doing something else.
Okay. I always give the formula of if you have a side hustle that you love doing and you have your regular job, when you get to replace 60% of your income, you could, and you have 6 months in the bank, that's when you can leave because that extra 40 hours should be working towards, towards filling that 40%.
Because you're never going to get to 100% doing what you're doing. Most of the time, like, you know, like sometimes you can throw a shot in the dark and it's going to happen. But you're right, man. Like 60% is a solid number because you're at least good enough where you're like, okay, if I put my full attention to this, what can I do?
Give me a versus of somebody who maybe turned out to be extraordinary and a comparable. It could be boxers, it could be a sports analogy, it could be a business analogy, it could be a company analogy. I think about one of my favorite books by David Brown, Business Wars. That
yeah, that's a great podcast.
Yeah, I had him on the other podcast a while ago. I'm a huge David Brown fan. So maybe give me an example of somebody who kind of became extraordinary, but somebody similar in the same space kind of didn't. And what was it? What was the delta? What was the difference?
Here's a good one: Tom Brady and Drew Henson. You remember Drew Henson?
You mean Drew Bledsoe?
No, I mean Drew Henson.
It was Drew Henson.
Drew Henson was a first-round pick of the New York Yankees, and Drew Henson and Tom Brady was also a first-round pick of the Montreal Expos, by the way. Drew Henson and Tom Brady are both quarterbacks on the Michigan Wolverines in the year 2000.
Oh shit!
And Lloyd Carr, who was the coach at that time, did this weird thing where he played Tom Brady in half the games and he played Drew Henson in half the games. And Tom was just a better quarterback. And he committed to football, continued to play football. And, you know, he wasn't always the best, but he would outwork you, right? And that was really important. So where he didn't have the ability, he would put in the mental attitude to get there. And, you look and he's 45 in August, man, and he's still playing and he's still playing well. And he's the best quarterback, in that era. Now let's go back to Drew Henson. Drew Henson, drafted in the first round by the Yankees, plays a few years in the Yankees minor league system. They keep talking about he's going to be this incredible third baseman, Drew Henson. He's going to be great. And he was just terrible. He wasn't very good. So he goes back to school at Michigan, ends up competing against Tom Brady. Then he doesn't get any, he hasn't really committed to football. So he gets some NFL interest, but doesn't end up going to the NFL, goes back to baseball. And then when he's I think 29 years old, ends up being a backup quarterback for a year for the Cowboys. Wow. And that is the end of his NFL career. Wow. So, you know what I mean, man? He picked Tom Brady. He was an excellent baseball player. He was a catcher. He was actually a lefty. But he knew if he committed to football, he could study, he could outwork somebody, he could see it through, he'd find his opportunity, and he'd get there. And he had to, Mo Lewis from the Jets had to give that hard hit to Drew Bledsoe to make it happen. But he found his opportunity, ran with it because he stuck with his thing. Drew Henson, excellent athlete, excellent quarterback, excellent football player or baseball player, but he couldn't stick with one thing.
So, wow. Day and night.
That's a perfect comparison, right?
Day and night, and I'm very impressed by that. That was a good one. I thought Drew Bledsoe for a second. So okay.
No, Drew Henson, man.
So we're gonna do a giveaway. Type in extraordinary below. I'm gonna pick 15 people that write it. Also email me Tom New Theory, just write extraordinary, and we'll give away 15 books. On me. And what should people expect from the book, Jeremy?
They should expect no fluff because, I'm not somebody that I'm sorry. I'm not going to pity you. I'm going to expect you to figure it out. And I'm going to expect you to do it. And I'm going to expect you to work hard. So they're going to expect a lot of the things that they've ever been told about how to be successful to be absolutely shattered. This book is about hard work. It's about your personal integrity. It's about doing what you know is right. And it's about really developing yourself each and every day. So you're going to get some strategies from people that have, been platinum recording artists. They've been Hall of Fame athletes. They've, been in the high levels of government. So these are things that you can walk away with. You can knock away all the BS, man, and you can actually do something with it.
Because you've interviewed people at really high levels and multiple people, getting to 1,000, right? What are some of the common success factors that you see between between all these different people? And it's well, wait a second. These are the 3 to 5 things that I'm seeing in really successful, high-level people that aren't as successful doing. What are some of those? And how do we close that gap?
Well, number one, I'm gonna go back to Tom Brady. I didn't interview Tom, but I read 5 books about him so that I could, write coherently about him in the book. So it's the first story we tell. But when you look at him, he was tall, right? He's 6'4".
Yeah.
Has a weak arm. He's slow as anything. He runs like he's got a piano on his back. He's not an incredible athlete. He will outwork you every single day of the week. And when you look at somebody that's extraordinary, they weren't born extraordinary, but what they did made them extraordinary. They will outwork you every single day of the week. The second thing I would say that anybody can do is they are huge in self-education. Very few of them are actually in the career they went to school for, if they even went to school. And so they're actually big on their own self-education and taking responsibility for that, putting the right things in their head, putting the right information in front of them. Another thing I would say as well, if we're looking at that, so, we said first, right, they're willing to outwork you. 2, they're self-educated, which is a really big deal. But 3, they keep their personal integrity in, right? They don't sacrifice what they know to be right for what someone else would know to be right. So I would think if you can really focus on those 3 things, you're going to see a lot more go right in your life than wrong in your life. Be willing to outwork other people, man. Don't shy away from something that's hard. Worry about self-educating each and every day in every way you can, whether it's books, whether it's podcasts, whether it's free courses, whether it's paid courses, whatever it is, and keep your personal integrity always about you, man. Because you know what? There are some people that have went to jail because they did what they knew was right. And, maybe later on they were vindicated. There are some people that lost jobs because they know what they did is right. But you know what? They can still look themselves in the mirror in the morning. And when you don't respect yourself anymore, you're not going to be able to be extraordinary. You got to be able to respect yourself.
how do you not compromise your personal integrity, for money or for opportunity or just, short gain?
That's hard, man. You got to live by a code. And it's you talk to a lot of mafia guys.
Yeah.
Maybe in the eyes of others, what they're doing isn't right, but by their code, it's right, right? You look at Tony Soprano, the guy lived by a code. In his eyes, he was doing what was right. So personal integrity is not something I can define for you. It's not something you can define for me. So you set yourself up with a code, you live by that code, you don't sacrifice that code for you. You're doing what your personal integrity permits. Now, other people may look at that and be like, damn, dude's an asshole. But you're living by a code. And I think when you have that and you have something you kind of live your life by, you're not kind of turning with the wind.
That makes sense. All right. So, Jeremy, I'm going to put a link to the book, to the landing page, so people can buy the book. When I do giveaways, I get a lot of not just comments below, but I get a lot of emails. So don't assume if you put extraordinary, you're going to get one of the 15. I'm just going to get boosted. Jeremy's got a big audience. A lot of people are going to view this. So you know what? If you buy the book already and you say, hey, and somehow you win the book, let me know. And I have a lot of other stuff I can send you, or I'll send you a free.
Well, and here's what I'll do too. So like right now, like if you don't get one of those free books, you can actually go grab one over at getextraordinarybook.com.
Nice.
And what we're doing is people that order it through that page and come back with their order number, we're going to give them a free version of the audiobook.
Awesome.
Our audio guide called 30 Days to Extraordinary. So it's almost like a whole nother book of free stuff they're going to get, as well as our masterclass of the real skills they need to be extraordinary. Now, let's say that they get the giveaway here and they get one of those free books. Where it says order number, just come back and write, Armchair MBA in that section for order number, and we'll give you all those things that we're giving everybody that's buying it through that page.
Wow, that's generous of you. So for those that want to,
well, you have to have the freebie book from Tom, man. You can't just like write Armchair MBA and get free shit.
Yeah. I'll give you the name of the winners, just like
cool.
or their email, so they can't get in the system. But all right, so how do we find you? I'm going to put a link to the book below, but plug your social and also your podcast.
Yeah, so my podcast is called Create Your Own Life. I am at Jeremy Ryan Slate on all platforms. And the book, once again, is over at getextraordinarybook.com.
Love it, brother. I'll put the link below. Thank you for being on the Armchair MBA.
Hey.